This video on the Jonathan Majors case is going to go over 3 coincidences, or are they coincidences, related to the case and related to media reporting that happened to drop at some pretty sort of inconvenient times for the actor Jonathan Majors. Could it all be a coincidence? I guess it could be, but I'll let the audience decide about whether or not it is. The first example is a week in June 2023. Right at about the time that Business Insider and some other media outlets, the New York Times, etc., were starting to report that the New York City Police Department was going to file charges against Jonathan Majors' ex-girlfriend, Grace Jabari, Rolling Stone drops a piece right after that reporting on June 29, 2023. That piece was called "Jonathan Majors' Extreme Abuse Allegedly Goes Back Nearly a Decade." The timing of that really sort of buries the news of this counter-complaint from Majors on Jabari with regard to, evidence of an arrest. Of course, the arrest doesn't happen until October, but this was the first moment that news started to bubble up. And I guess you could say, well, there's no way they could have timed it at the Rolling Stone because they said that they had worked on it for months. So if they'd worked on it for months, maybe that was the time that it happened to drop on June 29, 2023. But you have to admit, and you can't deny, that the timing was particularly convenient for the prosecution. Next bit of interesting timing happens on October 24, 2023 and October 25, 2023. October 25, 2023 was the date that Judge Gaffey in the Jonathan Majors case had to rule on a motion, effectively a motion to dismiss the case. He ended up ruling that the case would go forward, that it would go to trial on October 25, 2023. But the day before that ruling came another story from the Rolling Stone with regard to Jonathan Majors' domestic violence case now involves London police. That happened on October 24, the day before that the judge was to rule on whether or not the case would go to trial. That story with regard to London police has never borne out to be true, at least not that I can find, and maybe I missed it. If somebody can find that article follow up with regard to London police being involved, then send it, put it in the chat, and I'll bring it up in the next video. I don't see anything other than the Rolling Stone mentioning that. Then there was sort of nothing after that. And keep in mind as you think about this is that most people don't get past the headline. They read the headline and they're done. So these headlines, extreme abuse, the abuse goes back decades. Of course, none of this is under oath. None of this is testimony in court. None of this is sworn testimony. And in this third example, we have folks that dated the actor who did not appear in court. Maybe they'll appear in the civil trial. Maybe they'll be sworn in the civil trial and under oath. And that makes everybody sort of on the same footing in terms of everybody is on the same rule. Majors is under oath. They're under oath. Everybody testifies under oath. So in this example, though, you have the media playing the game of putting stuff out with no rules of, obviously no penalty for lying, because there is no penalty for lying to the media. And that's a different standard, obviously, than what happens in a courtroom. But also just keep in mind, as I say, the headline a lot of times is the whole ball game. People read the headline. They believe that headline. Doesn't matter that there's 40 people in the story, none of whom are named, with zero attribution. That doesn't matter. It's just, wow, there's a big headline that he did this thing, and that's pretty much that does, of course, a lot of reputational damage. The third example that I would bring up happens between February 5th, 2024 and February 8, 2024. This is when Jonathan Majors' attorney, Priya Chaudhry, files a motion to set aside the case, basically laying out all the arguments in favor of her client of why she thinks this case should be set aside, why she thinks the court should effectively rule that the case should not have happened and been brought, etc., and so on. By the way, notice that none of the media that I know of reported on the document filed by Jonathan Majors' attorney. So nobody really knew what his arguments were at all. And this is part of the one-side reporting that you get typically in these sort of cases. So she files it. There's really no mention of it in the media. And on February 8, 2024, is this story by the New York Times. Jonathan Majors had a history of abuse in relationships, women say. So it comes the same week as Jonathan Majors' attorney is filing the motion to set aside, and the judge, of course, has to consider that motion, which, of course, he denies. You have to wonder, did he read the piece? Did he see the piece? I think everybody's human. He's working on this case. Now, maybe he didn't. Maybe he has the discipline. Maybe Judge Gaffey's like, no, I'm not paying any attention to any media. But can you say that about the jurors as well and everyone else? So it's interesting, though, that story drops right the same week that Priya Chaudhry files that motion to set aside. Again, some very inconvenient timing for Jonathan Majors and some very perfectly laid timing for the prosecution. So once again, the timing is absolutely perfect for the prosecution and absolutely destructive for the defendant every single time. Yes, of course, again, keep in mind that these news organizations did note in these stories that they had been working on them for months. And in fact, the reporting would indicate that they would have had to be working on them for months. A very time-consuming thing to talk to, over 10 people, 15 people, that type of thing. But when the story is actually published, in these three examples, is always like the worst time and the worst moment possible for the defendant, the actor Jonathan Majors. And at some point, it seems like that can't be a coincidence. I guess it could be. I mean, it's a big story. A lot of stories come out. You would publish as a news organization. You are going to publish it at the time of the most interest for the public, or the moment when the public is likely to be paying attention. But it is amazing that the same week as some consequential decision or there's something going on with regard to Majors' team, and then all of a sudden there's this big story that comes out that same moment, that same week. I have to say I'm a big fan when I'm sort of looking at a situation and maybe investigating something a little bit. I'm a big fan of looking at timing. I'm a big fan of looking at dates, calendars, times that things happen. Typically, it is not coincidental that something is happening at a certain moment in time. It didn't just fall out of the sky. And when you have things happening in the same 24-hour and 72-hour period on the same week as a judge is making a big decision, I tend to look at that and notice that. And that seemed to happen in the Jonathan Majors case over and over and over again. And it also seemed to happen always against him. It always seemed to happen, and it was a bad piece of news for the defense in the case, and a great piece of news for the prosecution every single time. I'm trying to think of any time that something happened in the timing that was actually good for him. And offhand, I can't think of anything. But once again, if there's anything I missed, put it in the chat, put it in the comments, and I will work it in and bring it up next time.